Grab your Bibles. Good morning, everybody. It is great to be with you this morning. It really, truly is a blessing to be able to come together and to spend time with one another. You know, not everybody sees the gathering together as a blessing. Not everybody is here this morning. If you look around the room this morning, there's going to be people who are missing. Now, some are not here because they're not feeling well, or maybe they're out of town. There's a number of reasons that people may not be here this morning. My own family is dealing with some different illnesses and things, and we know the struggles, right, and the frustrations that go along with dealing with health challenges, right? But I think it's also helpful for us to take a moment and consider some of the reasons why somebody would not see getting together with the church as a priority, not see this as a blessing. Right? Maybe they see it as just too much work, right? It's my one day to sleep in. Maybe, they thought about it, they considered getting up, but by the time that they got up and around and they were ready to walk out the door, they just felt it was too late. Maybe some people just crossing that threshold into a building with people that they don't know that well, into a space that they're not familiar with, maybe into a space where they have been hurt before by others and they've been judged by others. They just have a hard time getting in and through that door. And we need to acknowledge that there is a challenge to getting to the place where many of you are this morning who are here, who see this as a blessing, see this as a place where you find strength, where you find joy, where you get refilled. Because not everybody feels that way. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. As we head towards our National Back to Church Sunday, our Friends Day next week, one of the things we've been doing as we've been thinking about our neighbors and our friends is we need to acknowledge where they're at. We need to be aware of the challenges that they're going through. And we need to be thinking about and praying for them in those struggles. We need to be praying for one another in our struggles and our ability to speak into those situations, to encourage them to come. We've talked a little bit about the fact that an event, say like a potluck, is not in and of itself enough to get people in the door. It's not enough to grow the church. The way the church grows is not through events, it's through connection. It's through the relationships that we have with one another and we have with others that we then encourage and bring in. And then as that friendship grows, as that connection grows, then this gathering becomes more important. It becomes more of that lifeline of encouragement and strength that we all need. As we head into our Friends Day, I want us to look at one of the apostles that maybe we're not as familiar with. Starting here in verse 1 of starting here in John chapter 1, starting in verse 40. One of the two heard John speak and followed Jesus was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which means Christ. He then brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked upon him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which means Peter. The next day, Jesus decided to go out to Galilee, and there he found Philip, and he said to Philip, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Simon Peter. And Philip went and found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him whom Moses in the law was written about, and the prophets, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathan said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip said to him, "Come and see." There's a great number of things that we know about some of the apostles. You're probably familiar with Peter, right? Peter's always speaking. He's always saying something that's getting him into trouble. Maybe you know about Judas for not so good reasons, right? But some of the other disciples we don't know as much about. This morning I want us to specifically look at Andrew and Philip. These two have a history together, and I think it's a history that we should seek to emulate. Andrew and John were disciples of John the Baptist. They were spending time with John the Baptist. And when Jesus appeared to John at the River Jordan, and John made his proclamation, here's the Son of God, here is the Lamb of God, and he baptized him, these two men heard that proclamation. They also were there 40 days later after Jesus got back from his time in the wilderness, when John once again sees Jesus and says, there he is, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And these two men put two and two together and say, well, if John says that's the Christ, then I should follow the Christ, not the proclaimer of the Christ. So they begin to follow Jesus. Jesus turns around to these two men and say, what are you doing? What do you want? They said, we want to follow you. Where are you sleeping tonight? He says, oh, we'll come and see. And after spending a little bit of time with Jesus, Andrew's reaction is to go and find his brother Simon. And he goes and he finds Simon and he says, we found the Messiah. So Peter comes with his brother, maybe a little bit skeptical, and Jesus has this interaction with him where he renames him and calls him Peter or Pebble. Kind of a play on words there. But Andrew's reaction to spending time with Jesus is to go and bring his brother to meet Jesus. Because of that interaction, later on the Sea of Galilee, Jesus will step into the boat of these men. They will catch a huge catch of fish. And Jesus will say, come and follow me. I will make you fishers of men. And because Andrew had introduced Simon Peter to Jesus, when Peter sees this, he drops everything to follow Christ. And he becomes one of the main followers of Jesus. And we know lots about Peter. In a similar way, Philip, when he meets Jesus and spends time with Jesus, says, I got to tell my friend. And he goes and he finds Nathanael. And he goes and he tells him, we found the one that the prophets wrote about. We found the one who is greater than Moses. We found the Messiah. Come and see. Now, Nathan has more questions. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? I mean, that's a small little know-nothing town. Right? I mean, what good comes out of that place? It's a backwater place. Right? Pick your town that we're rivals with here in the valley, right? Can anything good come out of that little place? Right? Now, Nathanael's questioning of that, his wrestling with that, I think Philip's answer is really good. Because Philip doesn't seek to really answer that question. He doesn't seek to solve that problem. That wasn't a question that Philip was struggling with. And he's like, I don't have an answer to that. What I can tell you is that if you will come and spend time with him and you will see him, then he will answer your questions. And sometimes that's all we have to do, is to simply come to people and say, come and see, come and experience. We don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes it's enough simply to bring people and say, come and live life alongside me. Let's figure this thing out together. Nathan becomes a disciple as well. Simply because Andrew and Philip went and found a brother and a friend and brought them to Jesus, the number of disciples doubles basically overnight. Simply because they went out and they found somebody and they said, you should come meet this guy Jesus that I just met. Come and experience him. Come and see. There's a lot of reasons why people aren't here this morning. Maybe like my family, they woke up with a number of different things going on and they had good intentions to be here and they just didn't make it. And coming to church, being here in this building doesn't make you holier. Don't hear me saying, how dare you not be at church? But as we grow in fellowship, we grow in community, it's not a, you have to be at church. It's a, I want to be here. I need this. I want this. Because I need the encouragement. I need to spend time with one another. I can go over to Shipley's Donuts and I can get a Shipley's donut. I don't have to come here to get one for free. It's great when I can, right? But I don't come here for the coffee and donuts, as great as they are. I come here for the fellowship. I come here because of you all. Right? And you can't shame people into that. You come because you build those connections, because you build those friendships. And we invite them to come alongside us and say, come and see. Come and experience. Let's figure this thing out together. Could he be the Christ? And you walk with one another. And you spend time with one another. We fast forward a little bit. Jesus has become quite an attraction in the area. A huge number of people come to hear him speak. He's speaking for a long period of time. There's about 5,000 plus people, 5,000 men plus women and children gathered together listening to Jesus preach. And he has gone on and on and on. You think I'm bad. Jesus is teaching and speaking to this crowd for hours upon hours. So much so that the disciples come up and say, Jesus, we need to send these people home because they haven't eaten. We're a long way off. And it's going to be challenging for us to feed this group. They're going to faint on the way home. We have to end this. And Jesus, being aware of that, takes a moment. He takes a moment and he wants to teach his disciples something important. Something about who he is. He says, well, you feed them. And they quickly go through the logistics of that. It would take, one of them's an accountant, right? And he starts doing the numbers. At minimum wage, it would take this many years in order for us to make enough money to just feed a handful of people. Somebody else says, well, even if we went into town, the nearest town doesn't have nearly enough bread to feed everybody. And they're talking about how impossible the situation is. That was part of the point. But once again, I want to call your attention to Andrew, to his actions and what he does here. In John chapter 6, starting in verse 8, one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they among so many? Andrew stands up, comes over to Jesus with a Lunchable. That's really what it was. 5 small loaves, 5 crackers, and 2 small fish, 2 small sardines. some mom out there was smart enough to pack their son a lunchbox as he headed out the door, and he still's got it. And Andrew finds this young man and brings him to Jesus and says, this guy's willing to share his meal with the crowd. Once again, Andrew is bringing somebody to Jesus. Andrew is somebody who is approachable. Andrew is somebody who people find. Andrew is somebody who finds people, and he brings them to Jesus. He acknowledges, it's so small, it's not going to do much. Quite frankly, I'm not sure it would feed me, much less the inner circle, and we're definitely not feeding the crowd off of this. But I love what Jesus does. He says, it's enough. And he takes that willingness. He takes that little effort. He takes that faith and he multiplies it. Not only does he feed the crowd of 5,000 plus men, plus women and children, at the end they pick up the leftovers. There are 12 small baskets left over. There are 12 lunch boxes left over for the disciples. Not only does Jesus feed the crowd spiritually, but he feeds them physically. And he takes care of those who are helping him. He takes care of those who are doing the work. I love this story because it shows the character of our God, who is looking out for us, who cares about our needs. Not only does he want to share with us his word, not only does he want to feed us spiritually and bring us to know him, but he understands that we are flesh and blood, that we have needs, and he wants to fulfill those as best he can. He wants to take care of you. Isn't that what our study of Jesus at the beginning of the year showed us? Who he was, that he cares, that he's powerful enough to do it? Is that somebody that you want to bring others to know, others to experience? We fast forward a little bit further. In John chapter 12, Jesus is at the end of his ministry. We're going to start our reading here in verse 20. Now amongst those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks. These came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and they asked him, "Sir, we wish to see Jesus." Well, Philip went and told Andrew, and Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus. And Jesus answered him, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains only alone. But it bears much fruit. Whoever loves his life will lose it, but whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternity. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there will be my servants also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him as well." Once again, we have Philip and Andrew, two men who are approachable amongst the disciples. Two men who work together to then bring others to Jesus. An example for us to wrestle with, an example for us to follow. These two men see others. They're approachable by others, and they seek to bring others to know Jesus. Now, of course, these Greeks coming to Jesus is a signal to him that his time on earth, his ministry on earth is done. So Jesus begins to talk about the fact that this world is not his home, that his death upon the cross will bear fruit in many coming to be able to be in the presence of God, and how God will take care of those who are working. But once again, we have this example. Every time we see Andrew, he's bringing somebody to Jesus. We don't know much about Andrew, but he brought Peter to Jesus. He brought these Greeks to Jesus, and he brought the young boy to Jesus. There's even debate as to what part of the world Philip and Andrew ended up in. Some would say in the area of Ukraine and over into the Britain Isles. Who knows? But these men were known for bringing others to know Jesus. We need to ask ourselves, are we doing the same? Are we following that example? Do we see the needs around us? Are we willing to interact with the needs that are around us? The first sermon in this series was to identify that everyone is our neighbor. Everyone's our neighbor. It's not just the person that lives next to you. It's not just the people who are like you. And then it was encouragement to be praying for each other as we see each other as neighbors. And then it was to see the need of the neighbor. I hope you've been doing your homework. I hope you've been praying. I hope you've been looking around at those that you're in contact with, that you begin to pray for them, that you begin to see the struggles and the challenges that are going on in their lives. And we need to ask ourselves, how can we help them? What are some ways that we can interact with them and be good neighbors? Maybe it's helping them with yard work. Maybe it's volunteering somewhere within the community, visiting with people, leaving notes. One of the things that we've tried to do here recently is to have these notes. And on the back of these is a nice little fold line. It took a little bit to get the formatting right, but it shows you where to fold it, and then you can leave a note for one of your brothers or sisters. Or like some others, you can just leave them. You can draw a picture, leave a note for the whole congregation. That's what's back there currently, right? But to think about one another, to encourage one another, to write notes to one another, right? Maybe you have a get-together at your house for the neighborhood. What are the ways that God is calling you to interact with those around you, to build relationships, to be creative in the ways that you use your gifts? People don't like to be spoken to. I was talking with a lady who does a lot of work within the community and has visited a lot of churches, and I was talking to her, and she said, she's like, it's really hard to sit and have questions and not be able to ask those. Right? The sermon's not the time that you get to ask those. And I'm like, well, that's what class is for. Like, don't you have interactive classes? But people don't come to listen to somebody speak. Some say I have a soothing voice. But there's this poem. It says, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I'd rather one would walk with me than merely tell the way. The eye is a better pupil and more willing than the ear. Fine counsel is confusing, but an example is always clear. The best of all the preachers are the men who live their creed, for to see good put into action is what everybody needs. I soon can learn to do it if you'll only let me see it done. I can watch your hands in action, but your tongue too fast may run. The lecture you deliver may be very wise and true, but I'd rather get my lesson by observing what you do. For I might misunderstand you and your high advice you give, but there's no misunderstanding how you act and how you live. The sermon that will grow this church is not one that I will deliver from this pulpit or anyone else. The sermon that will grow this church is the one that you preach each and every day by the life that you live, by the relationships that you make. And that's why we are calling upon you and trying to pave the way for you to take nice little invitations and invite people that you know, that you have interactions with, to church. And maybe they say yes and maybe they say no. There's a number of reasons why somebody might not want to walk through these doors. But we invite and we live life alongside one another. And an event like this is nothing more than an excuse to invite our friends to church, into community, and to continue to bring up religious concepts so that we can continue to bring them to know Christ more and more each and every day. That's the purpose of next week. The potluck is great. Never been disappointed with a potluck. But not everybody likes a potluck. That's not going to draw a crowd. There's not going to be a bouncy house. There's not going to be any carnival rides. There's not going to be any helicopter dropping off a bunch of eggs. Right? There's no fanfare. It's about relationship. You can't shame people into it. You have to encourage them into it, love them into it. And really, I think what we see is the process of us praying for people and seeing a need and seeking to be the hands and feet of God and serving them, and then taking those opportunities to invite them into knowing God and continuing to serve them, continuing to live life alongside them, continuing to pray for them, and the cycle continues. And it doesn't stop once they start attending regularly. Now they're a part of the family. And now it grows.